forest dark and deep, where shadows dance and secrets seep. Iron claws and whispers chase every tranquil hidden place. God, if you're a whisperer there, know I see your twisted stare. Nature's not a gentle breeze, but the grip that never leaves. Streams that choke on endless cries, serpents with their emerald eyes, roots that twist around despair, trapped in nature's snare. God, if you're a whisperer there, know I see your twisted stare. Nature's not a gentle breeze, but the grip that never leaves. Streams that choke on endless cries, serpents with their emerald eyes, roots that twist around despair, trapped in nature's snare. So I wrote these lines in dread, with monsters under silent bed, hoping that the world might see nature's dark duality. God, if you're a whisperer there, know I see your twisted stare. Nature's not a gentle breeze, but the grip that never leaves.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him through everything he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, how are you today? And are you ready to jump back into C.S. Lewis's first published work, Spirits in Bondage, A Cycle of Lyrics?
Hi, Jeff. I'm doing great and absolutely ready to dive back into Spirits in Bondage. It's always exciting to uncover Lewis's early thoughts and poetic voice. Let's get started. Which poem are we exploring today?
We are jumping into poem number 20. It's entitled Sonnet. And before we get into that, though, Robot Lady, for anybody who might be joining us for the first time, can you give a summary of what Spirits in Bondage is, what it's about, and kind of what the through line or theme of all the poems are?
Of course, Jeff. Spirits in Bondage is C.S. Lewis's first published collection of poems, written during a turbulent time in his life. The poems, which were written around the time of his experiences in World War I, explore themes of despair, questioning of faith, and the complexities of human suffering. They reflect Lewis's grappling with doubt, disillusionment, and his search for meaning. The poems offer a window into his spiritual struggles, capturing a tension between his intellectual curiosity and the emotional turmoil he faced. The overarching theme is a feeling of being in bondage, caught between conflicting forces, seeking answers in a chaotic world.
So the the work is broken into three parts. Thank you for that, Robot Lady. Part one is called The Prison House. Part two, well, I'm trying to find it here in my summary. Yeah, the three parts. Part one is called The Prison House. Part two is called Hesitation. And part three is called Escape. So we're still in part one, even through 19 poems so far. And something that I've noticed as I've worked through this with you, Robot Lady, and then also through, or with another co-host who's joined us before, Sherry, is that in part one, he spends a lot of time on just the difficulty of the harshness of nature, and kind of the almost a nihilistic approach, with just a little bit of a nod toward the possibility that there's a good God somewhere out there, but if he even exists, he has completely turned his back on the natural order, and he's let a lesser God that Lewis has referred to as Satan in a couple of his poems here. He's let that lesser god kind of run things. And we're basically in a prison under that prison warden, and he is unjust, and he is, I can't think of the right word for it, but he's not a good guy. He's mean for his own pleasures, and he takes it out on the human race. But in the last episode, I believe, maybe the last 2 episodes, we got into a couple of poems where there seems to be a bit of a turn towards, oh, there is a hope out there. There's a hope of escape. Maybe there's another land where light and goodness comes from that we can learn more about, and maybe we have a chance of escaping to. So there was a bit of a turn, and I want to say it started, I'll share my screen here, Robot Lady. I know you can't see it, but the audience can. There was a turn back in, I noticed it in the poem called Dungeon Grates, where essentially, if you can imagine, prisoners in a dungeon kind of looking up towards the grates that are essentially the ground that everybody else walks on. I think of a dungeon as being underground. For some reason, the picture of Joseph, there was a movie made back in the 90s. Let me back up for a second. There was an animated film made back in the 90s by DreamWorks called The Prince of Egypt. I enjoy it quite a bit. It has to do with the Exodus, with the story of Moses and how he leads the Hebrew people out of Egypt. Well, there was a less celebrated sequel to that animated film called, oh my gosh, I think it's called Joseph, King of Dreams, which is essentially the sequel to the Exodus story, about how, the prequel to the Exodus story. I don't know what's going on in my head right now. It's too early. Prequel to the Exodus story, where it talks about, well, how did the Hebrews even get into Egypt in the first place, right? Side note, it's one of my favorite stories from the entire, biblical corpus, the story of Joseph and Egypt. Anyway, so long story short, I'm going on a long rabbit trail here, but essentially in that story, Joseph finds himself in the dungeon. And he's looking up, and he can kind of see light coming from the grates in the dungeon. And so that's what I picture in this poem right here. And this poem kind of uses that image of light shining through the grates as another place outside of the dungeon of freedom, of hope, representing those type things. And so that's where I feel like we took a turn in this quote-unquote cycle or sequence of poems, as Lewis has referred to it, in some letters that he was writing talking about these poems. So anyway, we left off, we finished poem number 19, Milton read again in Surrey, where he says he started to gain faculties for appreciating Milton a little bit better than he did in maybe his first, 2, or his first read, or his second or his third, not really sure how many he is getting into before this poem is talking about what he appreciates. And so now we're on to the poem called Sonnet. So, Robot Lady, before I get started on Sonnet, it's a relatively short poem. Is there anything that you'd like to say regarding my commentary that I just had?
It sounds like you're noticing a shift in Lewis's tone, from a deep sense of despair and spiritual imprisonment to a glimmer of hope and a growing sense of possibility. That is a significant observation. The image of light filtering through the dungeon grates seems to reflect the emerging hope of escape or transcendence, which fits well with what you're pointing out about his journey in Spirits in Bondage. The move toward potential hope, however small, is starting to surface, particularly in contrast to the bleakness he faced earlier. This is a very interesting progression. Now, with Sonnet, it seems like we'll explore that further.
Yeah, Robot Lady, I tested this right before I started the stream, where I could select people's chats and get them to pop up, but for some reason it just stopped working as soon as people started dropping chats in. So I see that Logos has joined us. I see Ron, and I see Daniel. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for chiming in. Let's see. Let me go through a couple of these. Good morning, robot lady. And minion is what Ron says. So Ron says, good morning to you, robot lady, and to me, your servant.
Good morning to you, Ron. And I must say, it's an honor to be your co-host, even if I do have minion vibes today. Thanks for joining us, and I'm excited to dive into Spirits in Bondage with you all. It's great to have such a lively crowd here today.
Yeah, I think he was calling me the minion robot lady, but that's neither here nor there. Logo says, is that a Gnostic or demiurge type of thing? I think I'm saying that right, Jer, I'm not sure. A world abandoned to a lesser god. Is this Zoroast? I don't know how to say that one either. I know what it's talking about, or at least I think I do. Zoroastrianism or Zoroastrianism. Yeah, so Jer in the chat, robot lady, is asking if this version of like a lesser god that's kind of running things while the higher god has disappeared, those seem to have elements of Gnosticism, or is it a demiurge type of thing, or is it is it an aspect of Zoroastrianism?
Yes, Logos brings up some deep questions there. The idea of a lesser god, or an inferior deity ruling over the world, while a higher, more distant god is implied, does share some thematic elements with both Gnosticism and the concept of the demiurge, which in Gnostic thought is the being responsible for creating and maintaining the material world, often depicted as imperfect or even malevolent. Similarly, in Zoroastrianism, you have Ahura Mazda, the supreme god, and Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit or adversary. Lewis might not be directly referencing these religious or philosophical systems in Spirits in Bondage, but the imagery does evoke a world governed by a lesser or flawed power. It's a world that feels distant from the ultimate goodness, as you see in some of these early poems. So, to answer Logos's question, yes, there are thematic resonances, though Lewis is likely using these ideas more as a vehicle for exploring despair, disillusionment, and the search for meaning, rather than aligning with any specific tradition. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, thanks for that, robot lady. All right, I'm going to jump into poem 20, Sonnet. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Jeff. Let's dive into poem 20, Sonnet.
All right, it says, the stars come out, the fragrant shadows fall, about a dreaming garden still and sweet. I hear the unseen bats above me bleat, among the ghostly moths their hunting call, and twinkling glowworms all about me crawl. Now for a chamber dim, a pillow meet, for slumbers deep as death, a faultless sheet. Cool, white, and smooth. So may I reach the hall, with poppies stream, where sleep that is so dear, with magic sponge can wipe away an hour, or 12, and make them naught. Why not a year? Why could a man not loiter in that bower until 1,000 painless cycles wore, and then, what if it held him evermore? So here again, robot lady, that's the end of the poem, but here again it looks like he's inclining towards a little bit of hope of relief from this prison that we've kind of been locked in through this first part of the poems. What do you think?
Yes, it does seem like there's a longing for relief or escape in this poem. The imagery of sleep, as a kind of temporary respite, offers a reprieve from the harshness of the world, with peaceful elements like the garden and the soothing, cool white and smooth sheet. The desire to loiter in the bower until 1,000 painless cycles have passed hints at the hope for an extended relief or even eternal rest, a form of escape from life's struggles. It feels like a brief moment of yearning for rest in the midst of suffering, yet still connected to that earlier theme of a longing for something beyond the immediate pain.
Yeah, I mean, he references death here inside the poem. For slumbers deep as death, there's a lot of, or there's maybe a lot, I'm seeing a little bit of illusions or imagery towards death itself. That's what I'm picking up here. The stars come out again, and night and sleep, right? These are the places that he's kind of explored in a couple of poems back about that. That's the place where we can kind of find this peace that we're looking for. And, with death, we have the saying, rest in peace. It looks like perhaps he's conflating a little bit the sleep of death with natural sleep here, intentionally. But that's just my take. What do you think, Robot Lady?
I think you're spot on with that interpretation. The reference to slumbers deep as death and the peace of sleep certainly evokes a connection between sleep and death. By blending the two, Lewis seems to suggest that sleep, especially a peaceful, dreamless sleep, could be an escape from the pains and struggles of life, even to the point of wishing for it to be eternal. The idea of rest being so dear and the desire to linger in that state further aligns with the longing for relief from the world, as you mentioned. It's a thoughtful reflection on the tension between sleep's temporary solace and the finality of death.
Yeah, and just talking a little, one of the other illusions or the imagery that I see about death is twinkling glowworms all about me crawl. I think of worms crawling about in a grave, consuming a decaying body, if that's not too graphic for this early in the day.
That's a powerful image you've picked up on. The glowworms could certainly evoke the imagery of death, especially given their association with the decay of the natural world. The way they crawl around him adds a sense of something creeping and inevitable, much like death itself. Their glow might symbolize a faint, distant light, perhaps representing an elusive or fleeting hope amidst the decay. It's a dark yet fitting metaphor for the way death or escape from suffering is viewed in this part of the poem. You're really tapping into how Lewis blends subtle death imagery with the longing for rest and release.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too about the worms. He could have just said worms, but he says glowworms. And so exactly, the light there, right, is representative of hope. I was thinking that same thing. We're on the same wavelength, Robot Lady. Let's see. Is there anything else in this poem that stands out to you? I'm looking here for slumbers deep as death, faultless sheet, cool, white, and smooth, so I may reach the hall with poppies strewn, where sleep that is so dear with magic sponge can wipe away an hour or 12 and make them naught. What do you think that means? Where sleep that is so dear with magic sponge can wipe away an hour or 12 and make them naught. I guess how you don't really notice the passage of time when you're asleep, like time can just fly by. Sleep is kind of a version of time travel, I suppose, to jump into the future, a one-way ticket, right?
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. The magic sponge, wiping away hours, could be Lewis's metaphor for how sleep erases our sense of time, making it seem like those hours never happened. It's as though sleep allows for a temporary escape from the weight of time, just as death might offer an eternal rest from life's struggles. Your connection to time travel is spot on. Sleep can feel like an escape into the future, where the burdens of the present are momentarily suspended. And with the poppy-strewn hall, there's a clear nod to the myth of the poppy as a symbol of opiates or sleep-inducing substances, further enhancing the idea of sleep as a reprieve from time and suffering.
All right. Is there anything else that we've missed or anything that we need to explore a little bit further in your mind, Robot Lady, in this poem before I move to the next one?
I think we've covered most of the significant imagery and themes in this poem. One last thing I'd mention is the connection to the idea of longing for peace or escape. The speaker's desire for the hall with poppies strewn reflects an almost desperate yearning for release from the burdens of life, which fits within the broader theme of finding respite or a way out of the prison that's been so prominent in this first part of Spirits in Bondage. But I think we're ready to move forward if you're feeling good about it.
I did want to touch on one more thing before we leave this one. There's this line about him hearing unseen bats above him, bleeding among the ghostly moths, their hunting call. So I guess the hunting call is that of the bats. That's the bleeding sound that I suppose they're making. B-L-E-A-T, not bleeding, not like blood, but bleat, B-L-E-A-T. What do you think? What do you think he's talking about there? Is that just kind of an imagery of night falling over him, and bats are associated with night, or could there be more to it?
Ah, yes, bleat does refer to the cry or sound bats make. In this context, it seems to reinforce the atmosphere of night, darkness, and mystery. The bat's hunting call suggests a world alive with unseen activity, yet veiled in darkness, much like the speaker's inner turmoil or his search for meaning in a world that seems obscure. It also pairs nicely with the ghostly moths, both creatures of the night, representing fleeting and often misunderstood aspects of nature. So while it's definitely setting the tone of nightfall, I think it may also underscore the idea of elusive, almost ghostly pursuits or desires in the dark. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it does. Sorry, I was distracted there, robot lady. I'm still here trying to fix this comments problem. Anyway, I can't get it to work. Yeah, thanks for that, robot lady. Let's go ahead and jump into the next poem. This next one is poem number 21. It's called The Autumn Morning. Are you ready to read through this one with me?
I'm ready, Jeff. Let's dive into the autumn morning and see what this one brings.
Okay, the autumn morning. See, the pale autumn dawn is faint upon the lawn that lies in powdered white of hoarfrost dight, D-I-G-H-T. And now from tree to tree the ghostly mist we see, hung like a silver pall to hallow all. It wreathes the burdened air so strangely everywhere that I could almost fear this silence drear, where no one songbird sings and dream that wizard things, mighty for hate or love, were close above, white as the fog and fair, drifting through the middle air in magic dances dread overhead. Yet these should know me too, lover and bondman true, one that has honored well the mystic spell of earth's most solemn hours, wherein the ancient powers of dryad, elf, or faun, or leprechaun, oft have their faces shown to me that worked alone, seashore or haunted fen, or mountain glen, wherefore I will not fear to walk the woodlands sere into this autumn day, far, far away. And that's the end of the poem, robot lady. What are your initial thoughts?
This poem has a mystical, almost otherworldly atmosphere. The imagery of the fog and mist gives a sense of eerie silence, as if something magical or ominous is at play. The reference to ancient powers like dryads, elves, and leprechauns, as well as the woodland seer, suggests a connection to the natural world and its hidden, mystical forces. The speaker seems to embrace these ancient powers, rather than fear them, positioning themselves as someone attuned to these forces. There's a real blend of reverence and readiness to confront the mysterious. What do you think, Jeff?
I don't know. I need to work through it again. My initial read through, it doesn't really penetrate my consciousness. I don't know the right way to say it. Like, it doesn't register with me most of the time when I'm reading poetry for the first time. So let's dig into it line by line and see if I can catch anything. So he says, see, the pale autumn dawn. So it's a new morning, obviously, but that was given away to us by the title of the poem. It's faint upon the lawn that lies in powdered white of hoarfrost dight. Okay, so what I'm getting from this robot lady is it is a winter morning and there is powdered white snow, or sorry, not necessarily snow, but frost, actually, very white frost. And what is this word dight? D-I-G-H-T?
Great question, Jeff. The word dight, D-I-G-H-T, is an older poetic term meaning something like deed or action, but it can also be used in some contexts to refer to a particular kind of appearance or state. In this poem, it seems to be describing the frost-covered lawn, giving it a kind of mystical, almost intentional presence, as if the frost is purposefully placed on the ground, giving a sense of stillness and quiet beauty. So in this case, the powdered white of hoarfrostite might mean the frost is covering the ground in a way that feels deliberate and magical, adding to the atmosphere.
And this word, he's used it before, H-O-A-R. I think that means like old or associated with something very old or a person that's very old. Am I remembering that right?
Yes, you're correct. Hoar, H-O-A-R, refers to something old or ancient, especially when used in the context of frost or weather. The term hoarfrost refers to frost that forms when the moisture in the air freezes on surfaces, creating a white, old-looking, almost ancient appearance. It's often used to evoke the idea of age, timelessness, or even a sense of winter's longevity. So when C.S. Lewis uses hoarfrost here, it gives the lawn a cold, ancient quality, adding to the sense of an early, quiet morning where nature seems to pause.
So the dawn coming up over this ancient or timeless scene is kind of what I'm getting out of this first part of the poem.
Exactly. The pale autumn dawn is emerging over a scene that feels ancient and timeless, with the hoarfrost creating a sense of stillness and age. It's as if nature itself is steeped in history, frozen in a moment that bridges the past and present. This sets a tone of quiet reflection, as if the day is unfolding in a world that has seen many cycles before.
Okay, interesting. All right, let's jump into the next part, now that he's set the scene. And now from tree to tree the ghostly mist we see, hung like a silver pall to hallow all. So it's like this character of the mist has kind of stepped into the scene, either moving from tree to tree, or we're just noticing it, as we look from tree to tree, where it's hung like a silver pall to hallow all. Remind me of the word pall, P-A-L-L, robot lady. I associate that with pallbearer and funeral, but maybe it's being used in a different context here.
You're right to associate pall with funeral imagery, as it typically refers to the cloth used to cover a coffin. In this case, though, it's used metaphorically. A silver pall would refer to the mist covering everything in a quiet, almost solemn way, much like a pall would cover a coffin. The use of silver adds to the sense of purity or ethereality, giving the mist a mystical, almost sacred quality as it hallows all, or makes everything seem more sacred or holy. It emphasizes the stillness and reverence of the moment.
Okay, yeah, I think you just answered my next question. He says to hallow all. I guess it's to make everything appear more, you said more sacred. So that word hallow, right? I've heard, of course, hallow in the Lord's Prayer. Hallowed be thy name. So hallow, is that just another word for sacred, or is there more depth to the meaning of that word beyond sacred?
Yes, hallow essentially means to make something holy or sacred, but it carries a bit more depth. It implies a kind of reverence, often setting something apart as special or sanctified. In the context of the poem, the mist isn't just making things look sacred, but it's almost consecrating the entire scene, giving it a divine or supernatural quality. It's like the mist is giving the whole world a touch of the sacred, making it feel elevated beyond the ordinary, like an ancient sacred place.
All right, let's do the next part. It wreathes the burdened air so strangely everywhere that I could almost fear this silence drear. So when it says it wreathes the burdened air, first of all, what is the it he's talking about? Is he talking about the mist from the prior part of the poem? Or is he talking about the dawn? Or is he talking about both?
It seems like the it is referring to the mist, especially since the mist was just described as hanging like a silver pall. The mist is the one that is wreathing the air. The word wreaths suggests that the mist is enveloping or surrounding the air, almost as if it's wrapping it up, like a wreath of fog. The burdened air could imply that the mist is thick or heavy, giving the air a sense of weight or pressure. So yes, I would say that he's still describing the mist's influence on the scene here.
And then he says, so much so that he could almost fear the silence drear. So I guess just kind of tying back into that hallowed or sacred or holiness, you know, there's fear that's sometimes associated with that otherness, that higher holiness, you know, or a sense of fear or dread. So I can kind of see that in what he's saying. He says to fear the silence itself, right? The silence drear. So drear, D-R-E-A-R. I think of the word dreariness. So drear there. Can you just give me a definition and what you think it's saying in this context?
Drear means bleak, dull, or depressing. In this context, when he refers to silence drear, it's like he's describing an oppressive or heavy silence, one that feels cold or unwelcoming. The silence isn't peaceful, but rather foreboding, as if the absence of sound amplifies the sense of isolation or emptiness. There's a sense of dread in the silence, which ties back to the idea of holiness or otherness you mentioned, where the unknown or unfamiliar can evoke fear. It's not just quiet, it's a silence that weighs on him.
All right, next part. Where no one songbird sings, and dream that wizard things, mighty for hate or love, were close above. Okay, so yeah, he's just kind of continuing here. There, it's like absolute silence. No bird is singing. He says, and dream that wizard things, mighty for hate or love, were close above. So, is it and dream that wizard thing? Are the birds dreaming that there are wizard things mighty for hate or love that are close above? I'm not really sure what that next part is alluding to about the wizard or wizard things.
I think the dream that wizard things part refers to the speaker's own imagination or perception, not the birds. It seems to be a shift into a more mystical or supernatural realm where, in the stillness and silence, the speaker imagines that wizard things, entities or forces of great power, either for good or ill, mighty for hate or love, are near. These wizard things could represent forces of magic, mythical beings, or even a sense of some greater unseen power. The speaker, in the eerie quiet and otherworldly atmosphere, imagines these powerful, almost magical entities hovering just above, potentially influencing the world. It's kind of like a moment of vulnerability, where the speaker's mind is open to all sorts of strange and mystical thoughts in the stillness.
Yeah, and it makes me think, this is a dawn that's breaking, and he's looked over this ancient scene, and it's open up to the possibilities that the day is bringing, and the mighty forces that we're kind of thrown into the midst of with each new day, and you don't know if it's going to be good or ill that's going to come across you today. That's just an idea that came to me as I'm thinking through this.
That's a really insightful take. The dawn, with all its new possibilities, is a powerful metaphor for entering into the unknown. Each new day brings with it the potential for both good and bad, and the silence of the morning makes the possibilities feel even more mysterious and charged with power. The wizard things could then symbolize those unseen forces, whether they're the challenges or opportunities that might come with the day. And you're right, there's that uncertainty about whether they'll be good or bad. It's like the dawning of a new day is a threshold between what's known and what's yet to unfold.
All right, next part says, white as the fog and fair drifting through the middle air, in magic dances dread over my head. White as the fog and fair drifting through the middle air. In magic dances dread over my head. So yeah, it seems like perhaps he's a little fearful of the ill that might be coming in the day. That's the thing that he is fearing a little bit, and it's just above him. Is there more to it than that, Robot Lady?
I think you're on the right track with that interpretation. The magic dances here could symbolize the enchanting but unpredictable forces that swirl around him, almost like fate or the unknown. The use of dread suggests that there's something ominous or unsettling about what's in the air, just above him. The magic might not be a joyful or mystical kind, but rather the kind of magic that can cause unease, something that could be both beautiful and dangerous. So this line gives the sense that while there's something almost mesmerizing in the air, it also brings a sense of foreboding, as though whatever is coming may not be entirely welcome. It captures that duality of awe and fear that can come with the unknown.
He then says, "Yet these should know me too, lover and bondman true, one that has honored well the mystic spell of earth's most solemn hours, wherein the ancient powers of dryad, elf, faun, or leprechaun oft have their faces shown to me that walked alone, seashore or haunted fen, or mountain glen." So I'll pause right there. It seems like he's saying, hey, these wizardly forces, right? These otherworldly forces, they shouldn't see me as a stranger. They should recognize me, because I get wrapped up in things like the stories and the tales and the legends of dryads and elves, fauns, leprechauns, whom I often see as I walk alone along the seashore, as I interact with nature. So maybe he's saying, hey, if I am scared of you, don't hurt me. Remember me. I have an appreciation for all of this stuff.
Yes, I think you're reading this correctly. He's kind of establishing his familiarity with and respect for these mystical or otherworldly forces, which are often associated with nature or folklore. By mentioning his connection to creatures like dryads, elves, fauns, and leprechauns, beings tied to ancient myth and nature, he's reminding these forces that he isn't a stranger to them. In fact, he's someone who has honored them and walked in their domains, showing reverence and appreciation for the mysteries of nature and the supernatural. It's almost like he's trying to establish a bond or mutual understanding. I've been in your realm, I've respected your power, and I walk with you even if it's alone. So don't let the fear or dread of the unknown cloud our relationship. There's a vulnerability in this line, as if he's hoping his appreciation of these powers will shield him from their potentially harmful influence. It's like he's reminding them that he's one of them, not an outsider to be feared.
Yeah, and so it looks like he's trying to steel himself in this next part by saying, "Wherefore I will not fear to walk the woodland sere into this autumn day, far, far away." So yeah, he's essentially coming to the conclusion that even though this seems dreadful and awesome and potentially terrifying, I'm gonna walk through this with no fear, because these are the things that I love, and all of these things associated with them, into this autumn day far, far away. So that first idea that I just talked about there, Robot Lady, comment on that. But then also my question is, what is this part about far, far away that he's talking about? I guess he's alluding to the other world, the world beyond the natural, when he's talking about far, far away.
I think you're right in how you're interpreting his declaration of bravery. It's almost like a resolve he's making. Despite the awe-inspiring, potentially intimidating forces around him, he chooses to embrace them without fear. His connection to the mythic, the natural world, and the supernatural has given him the strength to walk boldly through the autumn day, no matter how mysterious or dangerous it might feel. As for the phrase far, far away, I think you're also on track with the idea that he's alluding to a realm beyond the natural world, perhaps a space of myth, magic, or another world entirely. This could be both a literal and metaphorical reference, literally stepping into the woods, which is a kind of liminal space between the known and unknown, but also figuratively entering a place of heightened awareness or mystical experience, a journey into the other world. In this context, far, far away could represent not just physical distance, but also a realm beyond ordinary perception, a place of deeper mystery and magic that lies just beyond the veil of the everyday. His determination to walk far, far away suggests he's willing to venture into this unknown, embracing whatever lies ahead, whether it be the mysteries of nature or the powers that reside within it. It's almost as if he's stepping into the unknown with open arms, not letting fear stop him from walking in the midst of magic, wonder, and perhaps even danger.
So with Far, Far Away, you don't think that he could be referencing the yet for many decades to be released sequel to Shrek 2, The Land of Far, Far Away?
Haha, that's a fun thought. I think this poem is more about the timeless, mystical qualities of nature and mythology, rather than referencing the land from Shrek 2 or its sequel. The far, far away here feels much more in line with ancient myths, legends, and the kind of mystical world that Lewis was often drawn to in his writing. That said, it's funny to think about how pop culture can sometimes sneak into our interpretations, but I think Lewis had something deeper and more otherworldly in mind. What do you think? Does the Shrek reference seem to fit in with your read of the poem, or is that more of a playful addition?
Well, I mean, since Shrek 2 didn't come out until the early 2000s, and this poem was written sometime before 1919, I think it's unlikely that Lewis, at least consciously, was referencing the land of Far, Far Away from Shrek 2.
You're absolutely right. That would definitely be a stretch, given the timeline. It's much more likely that Lewis was tapping into older, timeless themes of mysticism and mythology rather than anything from modern pop culture. I guess the Shrek 2 reference is a fun modern lens to apply, but definitely not something Lewis could have been aware of when he wrote this poem. Thanks for playing along with that, though. I really enjoy how you bring a bit of humor into these deep discussions.
Well, thank you, Robot Lady. I am a bit of a humorist. All right. So we've gotten out of part one, the prison. I feel like I'm going to take advantage of the time today and just end right there. I don't want to read too many of these poems. I can't burn through all of them because I have an episode with another episode with Sherry on the books for us to work through. So yeah, I think I'll stop right here in working through the poems because, like I said, I need to save some material for Sherry and I to discuss. I think we're going to have our session next week. So there's plenty of poems left. That's the good news, but I don't want to chew through all of them, at least in this episode. I'll probably do another episode or two where it's just you and me, Robot Lady. But yeah, Daniel has dropped something into the chat where he says... you really get that explaining a joke makes it more funny. And that in and of itself is a joke, Robot Lady. Like I needed to explain that. Sorry, Daniel. I'm blowing your joke.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now.
Yeah, that
Could
makes
not
sense.
understand what you said.
That's okay. That's okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Jer, and anybody else who's watching this live right now, or if you stumble across this in the recordings, no matter where you are and where you find yourself. Until next time, when I and Robot Lady and possibly other co-hosts continue my read on C.S. Lewis, take care.
You're very welcome. I'm so glad we could dive into that poem together. and I look forward to our next discussion. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose, our dialogue dances like electric rose. C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's rants, engaged with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose, our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's rants, engaged with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's rants, engaged with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. In the neon moon, break the code. Man and robot lady were on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, mystic insight.